children. It is the hairless version of Mr. Moorhead coming to you in this video. Now, one of my favorite comic books, I'm a pretty big comic book fan, was The Walking Dead. And it started out as a comic book and it became a TV show somewhat later. Now, if you've watched The Walking Dead, it's about zombies. But after you go a little while into the comic book or into the show, the scary part are actually the people. The people are what you have to be really fearful of. What if I told you there was a period in history just like The Walking Dead? It's identical to it. It really did happen. Do you believe me? Well, you should, because it did. Okay? The only difference, there's no zombies. There's no zombies. So, how did this happen? There was a period in history where if you went to a store, there's nothing there. If you went into a city, chances are if you saw someone, they're running away from you. You could go to a farm and the crops are dying. They're just laying there. It's difficult to see people that are alive. You'd probably see dead people everywhere. You would go past like schools or houses and there'd be X's on the door. It means not to go in there. This period of history really happened. And again, it's just like The Walking Dead. People kind of gathered up food. Money didn't really mean a lot at certain points and in certain areas because it didn't do anything. They were trading for stuff because it was so hard to find. This period of history, you've already learned about it, but I'm hoping to give you much more detail than you got before. This is the Black Plague. It's also called the bubonic plague or the Black Death. And within this plague, it absolutely ravished the continent of Europe. It destroyed big chunks of Asia, and it took out a good portion of the top part of Africa. Okay, so this is devastating. Now we're dealing with with a pandemic now. Okay, but it's got nothing on the Black Plague. So let's take a look at that. So we're looking at about 1/3 of the population dead. So if we are looking at our morning meeting and we count it off by threes, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, one out of that group is dead. Now, that's not how the plague struck. It struck entire families, okay? It struck entire areas to where there are people with certain last names that don't exist anymore because it killed the whole family. Families tended to live together, not spread apart like we do now. And it wiped out entire families. When it hit a city, if the people did not leave or stay away from each other fast enough, like it took out the entire city. So we have places where there's just not anybody there because they're all dead. Okay. Now, looking at killing about 1/3 of the population, but Europe tends to be the hardest hit in that. Probably about half of Europe. Man, that is huge. That is absolutely huge in terms of death. Now, Eurasia is like that part near the Ural Mountains. So it's kind of the not quite Asia, not quite Europe, that type thing. The Middle East, that's Arabia and those areas, and North Africa. So we're talking about like Egypt over to Morocco. Now, most likely this was spread by the Mongols. This was a very powerful empire in Asia. They are able to take over China at one point, and they actually increased trade going from Asia to Europe. And we think that this is how the disease was spread. So, what spread it? Now, the disease is spread by this flea, okay? But the flea has to have something to be able to get the disease itself. And that is a rat, okay? So, I need to go back. So, this flea basically bites a rat, and then this flea is able to bite something else and spread the plague from the rat to the new host, if you will, that it bit. All right. So as this moved across the world and moved into Europe, Europe was ripe for this setting, for this plague to take hold. Because if you threw your trash away, you generally just threw it in the street. Okay, if you had to go to the restroom, you went to the restroom in a chair with a bowl underneath it, and you kind of just went out back and tossed it. Cities had rats everywhere, especially in Europe. If it's a trading city, they had rats everywhere. I don't know if you've spent much time around docks or boats, but you tend to see rats in that area. Rats congregate where they can get food very, very easily. And in heavily populated, dirty cities, you're going to have a lot of rats. In areas with lots of trade where they're bringing food and grain and all this stuff in or sending it out, you're going to get lots of rats. So this area, these trading areas in Europe were ripe for this devastating disease. Again, this flea comes from Asia. It's on the rats. It slowly starts to spread the disease from rats to people. So what happens if you get the plague? What happens if you get it? First off, most likely, if you get the plague, you're going to die. Now, we're dealing with COVID now. Pretty good chance that if you get COVID, you're probably not going to die. All right? So, a pretty good chance of that. If you get the bubonic plague, more than likely you will die. Okay? So, the very first sign that you are getting the plague is underneath your armpits right here on your throat, like in this area, or in your upper groin. So about where you wear, I can't show, but it's about right where you wear your belt, okay? So maybe just a couple inches below your belly button, you will get these large egg-shaped knots. They're called buboes. And that is the sign, uh-oh, you got the plague, yo. It's right there. You get these huge knots, all right? Number 2, day 2, when you have the plague. Because generally, you're going to die within 5 days. But if you survive to day 2, you begin vomiting, okay? And now this isn't a, like, my tummy's upset. Oh, I got an upset tummy. I ate lunchroom food. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about like heaving. And to the point, I don't know if you've ever gotten this sick, but these people continue to vomit until there's nothing left. Like their body is making the vomit motion, but nothing's coming out. I'm hungry all of a sudden. Is anybody else hungry? Gosh, I'm starving. Oh my God. Okay, third day. The third day. If you live this long, your body begins to turn colors. Okay, you get to these like purplish, bluish patches underneath your skin, and the reason why, you're bleeding. You're bleeding internally. Now, most people are going to die by this third day, but if you're lucky enough to make it to day 4, it's the worst day. Day 4, the bubonic plague attacks your nervous system. Now, the strongest, toughest guy I've ever known is my dad, okay? My dad had a disease called Lou Gehrig's disease. I don't remember if you remember the ice bucket challenge. My dad had that disease. And the way that they test for you to see if you have that disease, it's a disease that strikes your nervous system, is essentially, I'm probably explaining this wrong, but this is how it appeared to me. They give you a very light electrocution, okay? They hit your nerves with energy, and it tells the computer if that nerve is still working or not. And they're able to use that information to tell if you have that disease. I remember my dad having to take that test. They put this thing inside of his mouth for him to bite on so he didn't bite his tongue off. That is how painful this test was. He cried. Like, even though they like shocked him just for a few seconds at a time, he shook violently. The reason why I mention this is because it is what the plague does, except it doesn't do it for a few seconds. It's kind of like getting electrocuted. You would see these people just twitch really, really bad to the point that they can't say anything. So you can imagine walking down the street, you see dead people everywhere, and you look over and there's a guy still alive and he's just twitching. Like he's in so much pain, he can't talk, and he's just shaking. More than likely, if he hasn't died already up to this 3 days, if he's in this 4th day, that kills him. So your nervous system is attacked on day 4. Day 5, if you've made it all 5 days, most likely you're going to live. Your body fought it off. And here is the sign that your body fought it off. Those knots that are here, your armpits and your upper groin, okay, a couple inches below your belly button, those bust. And when they bust, you can read people's accounts. They talk, it's like this black tar stuff comes out. I'm still starving. God, I'm hungry. Anyway, this black tar stuff comes out, and it smells horribly bad. Like those people back then wrote about just how awful it stank. Okay. So if that happens, more than likely you're going to live. Now, somebody always asks every year, can't you just pop them things? That's not how that works. It's not a pimple. You're not trying to pop a pimple before you go to prom. What's wrong with you? It pops because you've gotten well. It doesn't, you don't get well because you popped it. All right. So you can look at this. I've got this handy dandy chart. So we can see the guy with the buboes here. We see this guy getting rid of some of his lunchroom food. We see the bleeding and bruising here. We see the attack of his nervous system there, and he has gotten better. Guys, this is the Black Plague. It wiped out entire cities, entire families, to the point where people didn't have food at the store. They're not interested in money because it doesn't do anything. And folks moved out into the country and stayed away from everyone. Now, this will hit throughout history. It hit in the Roman times. It hit in medieval times, right around the time of the Medici. It's going to strike in one of our future stories. But every time it comes back, people tend to handle it better. So here is the neat part. If you are listening to my voice, more than likely, you have someone in your ancestry, in your family, that probably had this, and they lived. And that's why you're not getting it today. Your family somehow survived it and passed immunity on to you. All right, I hope you enjoyed the lesson. I'm sure some of you are going to run out and get some food real quick. You're starving after hearing that. And we have a video that we have to watch. It will be assigned in Discovery Ed. You go to ClassLink, the Discovery Ed, and you should see something there that says, hey, this guy assigned you something. And you are going to watch it. If you are unable to, which I don't know why, I'll make sure I get it to you Monday as well. All right, kids, I hope you enjoyed the lesson. Thanks a lot. Bye for now.